America pulls back from values that once defined it. NRC Wall Street Journal poll finds patriotism, religion, and hard work hold less importance. That last one sounds like a meme, but it actually isn't. Look at this. Patriotism, religious faith, and having children and other priorities that help define American national character for generations are receding in importance for Americans, a new Wall Street Journal NROC poll finds. The survey, conducted with NROC at the University of Chicago, a nonpartisan research organization, also finds the country sharply divided by political party over social trends such as the push for racial diversity in business and the use of gender-neutral pronouns. Some 30% of respondents said patriotism was very important to them, and 39% said religion was very important to them. That was down sharply from when the journal first asked the question in 1998, when 70% deemed patriotism to be very important and 62% said so of religion. The share of Americans who say that having children, involvement in the community, and hard work were very important values also have fallen. Tolerance for others, deemed very important by 80% of Americans as recently as 4 years ago, have fallen to 58% since then. Bill McTurf, an pollster who worked on the previous journal survey that measured these attitudes along with NBC News, said that these differences are so dramatic, it paints a new and surprising portrait of a changing America, he surmised. Perhaps the toll of our political division, COVID, and the lowest economic confidence in decades is having a startling effect as well. A number of events have shaken and in some ways fractured the nation since the journal first asked questions about unifying values. Among them was the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, the financial crisis 2008, and the subsequent economic downturn and rise of former President Donald Trump. Okay, one last part of this before we go into the actual data of the polling. The only priority the journal tested that has grown in importance in the past quarter century is money, which was cited as very important by 43% in the new survey, up from 31% in 1998. Aside from money, all age groups, including seniors, attach far less importance to these priorities and values than when pollsters asked about them in 1998 and 2019. But younger Americans in particular place low importance on these values, many of which were central to the lives of their parents. Some 23% of adults under the age of 30 said in the survey that patriotism was very important to them personally. Compared with 59% of seniors aged 65 or older, some 31% of respondents said that religion was very important to them, compared with 55% before. Only 23% of adults age 30 said that having children was very important. Okay, so I want to talk about these numbers. This goes into a bunch of like conversations with individual people about what they think of the number across the political spectrum, but I want to go through these numbers, and I want to go through the partisan divide on these numbers, the drop in age groups for these numbers, because these numbers are pretty wild. So let's bring up all the polling data. Let's see if I can. Oh, I can't. This one is not. What the heck? I open it up in a new tab and this is what I get. Okay, never mind. We're just gonna have to zoom in because the Wall Street Journal wants to be difficult. So let's start with the easiest one, the first one. So this shows that patriotism since 1998 has gone down to 38%. That is a massive decline. So when we say patriotism, and this is true for the entirety of this polling, it is not that only 38% of Americans now care about patriotism, is that only 38% of Americans now consider patriotism to be very important to them. So it could still be important to them, but it might not be very important to them. It could be slightly important to them, or maybe important to them, but not very important to them. So this is a drastic drop. What did this? I don't know. I do think that, as we were talking about earlier, political divisions could have contributed to this, because loving people in your community, being a part of your community, loving your neighbors, being proud of your country, these are all things that can contribute to patriotism. And not only is it the fact that a lot of people feel more divided than ever, and that could take away more from the patriotism and push you more towards partisan nationalism. I do also think that our country has gone through a lot of things recently, like the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, the 2008 financial crisis, the divisions around Donald Trump, January 6th, a million different issues, COVID, that could have made a lot of people think, of course, there was 9/11 as well, the war on terror broadly, could make people feel less patriotic in their country, less proud of their country. Because when we're talking about 1998, this is right off the beat of the Cold War. We just won a civilizational struggle against the Soviet Union. So I do think that being a high point for patriotism isn't that crazy. And the idea that defeating communism and then 20 years going through 9/11, all these other things could have helped to bring that down. I think, and I don't know if this is going to be a radical thing to say in my chat, I do think that decreasing patriotism is bad for a country, because I don't think patriotism just means chest beating, rah, flag waving, we support every war. Patriotism can be easily translated into love of country, pride in country, the type of stuff that helps unite us and keep our country together. And the unity of our country is what protects our civil liberties, what protects our peace, which starves off things like civil war and separatist movements that can lead to violence. And so seeing that go down is of a concern, even though maybe some other people, other libtards, would be less concerned about this. The religion section, this is something that is not just true in the United States. This is true all around the world. The majority of Americans are still Christian. You can't dispute that. The numbers still align with it. Now, if you're a Christian nationalist, maybe you'll say something along the lines of, yeah, they're Christian, but they're okay with gays, or they're okay with women voting, or they're okay with this, they're okay with that, and therefore they're not true Christians. Okay, you can believe that if you want, but the majority of Americans still identify as Christians. But religiosity being the center of public life has decreased. This has decreased as our society has continued to secularize more and more, and has also increased as we've been able to have more scientific breakthroughs, allowing us to find more natural, more explanations for the creation of the world, more explanations for the conditions of the world, and more ways to analyze the development of human beings through the studying of natural cycles, the studying of evolution, the studying of science. And I think that has also contributed to that. This is true across much of the developed, the quote unquote, I hate this word, but the quote unquote developed, extremely economically prosperous, high standard of living world, and in parts of the world that has the most scientific development and highest rates of education. So it's not that surprising that we're seeing that to decrease. And I don't even think that is that big of a concern, if really any, if a concern at all. The biggest thing that is of concern to me is community involvement. In 1998, the love for community involvement was at 47%. Not the best, but not the worst. Then 2019 comes around before the 2020 election, and community involvement goes up to 62%. Wow. That's great. Something happened in those years to raise community involvement. I think community involvement and patriotism generally overlap. If you care about your country, if you care about your community, then you're going to do what is necessary to take care of your country, to take care of your community, to take care of the homeless in your area, to take care of the elderly, to make sure that people aren't left behind. But after the combination of COVID, January 6th, the end of Donald Trump's presidency, escalating political division, we see community involvement in 3 years, in 3 to 4 years, go from 62% to 27%. Such a stark decrease. There's nothing else. There's no other number that can even come close to being that much of a decrease. I mean, from 2019 to 2023 for patriotism is 61% to 38. This is 62%, 27%. It started at 1% higher and went even lower by an 11-point margin. I mean, that is insane. That is extremely concerning to me. Definitely when you consider the fact that there are a lot of people who are not just supported by social safety nets. There are a lot of people who are not just supported by the government who comes in and gives them everything they need. A lot of elderly people who need help with groceries. A lot of elderly people who need help being driven to the grocery store, who might need help being driven to doctor's appointments. There's a lot of people who are quite lonely in our communities who could probably benefit from community cookouts, community events, even things like church, that can allow them to, know people and be friendly with those in their community. That is extremely important, not only to make sure that those in a community are taken care of, and of course, it is very fulfilling to be involved with those around you, to know people around you. It's a very fulfilling feeling, but it's also important for the mental health of people in our country. If you don't get involved in your community and be part of your community, I think the odds of you having poor mental health are probably much higher than if you were to stay in your home, be a recluse, and get radicalized on the internet. There's also been a marked decrease in the interest of having children. I do think this can be concerning to a certain extent. If we want our social programs to be able to regenerate themselves, be able to sustain themselves for things like Social Security and others, we're going to need people, young people in the future, to pay into these programs. And that's where people having children comes in. It's important for society, unless you use the secret cheat code, and I'm a huge fan of this, called immigration and assimilation, which, it's a fun cheat code. You gotta go like down, up, sideways, A, B, A, B, A, B. It's a secret cheat code that you can only access if you haven't gone down the Hitler DLC path. So, but I do advise it. I am in favor of it. The thing that only did go up out of all this polling data, and there is something, while again, it's not bad to have an interest in money, it does feel pretty scummy to have all these other things go down. This is the only thing that went up. Since 1998, there has been a 12-point jump in the interest in money and a 2-point jump since 2019. That is the only metric that has increased, is the amount of Americans like money. We are more commercialized than ever. Capitalism is the one value. The access to the market is the one value that seems to be increasingly uniting all Americans, is moolah. That is not a good sign. If you wanted to see the gaps between age groups, if you're 65 or older, you're nearly 60% you care about patriotism. If you're 18 to 29, you're probably at like 22%, which, again, concerning numbers. You'd probably find something along these numbers, as in younger people are generally less patriotic than older people across most societies, but this is a very stark decrease. But actually, I would say, after being in Ukraine, I don't think that's true here. I would say that young people are some of the most patriotic people in Ukraine that I've met. I don't think I've met a young person in Ukraine who wouldn't consider himself patriotic. Maybe one person, and even he supports the Ukrainian struggle in the war, even if he himself isn't that incredibly patriotic. Having children between 65 and young people is actually, and this is the thing that really surprised me, not that big of a jump for young people and old people. It seems that universally across all of American society, having children and the interest in that has just generally gone down as a priority for people. There's a gap between religion of 24 points between the youth and the elderly, and hard work does seem to still be, and thank God. Do you know how shitty it would be if I was like, Americans no longer care about hard work? Because I hear people say this today, like, kids today don't care about hard work. Well, the majority of them do. Over 60% of them still care about hard work, even if it's still a 14% drop from the elderly. The majority of young people still value hard work. Once that goes under 50%, the stereotypes of the avocado toast, tea-sucking, soy-loving liberal will finally be true. My goodness. Some pretty concerning numbers. And if you were curious about the political alignment, you can see it right here. Patriotism, 59% of Republicans compared to Democrats. Of course, the thing that's interesting about this, is I'm sure that a lot of the Democrats' version of patriotism, a lot of the independents' version of patriotism is different than a Republican version of patriotism. And I think that's also what's difficult about polling on something like patriotism. Because if I said I was patriotic, because I would consider myself patriotic, the reasons I would give is probably our civil liberties and my want to continue to improve our country. Where somebody else might define patriotism kind of as like, oh, I defend our country against these libtard critics and against this and against that, where somebody's definition of patriotism can be different from person to person. Religion, very stark difference between Democrats and Republicans. Not a big jump, not that crazy. 27% for Democrats, 38% for independents, 3% for Republicans. For having children, again, for everybody, it's gone down. Only 38% of Republicans think having children is important to them, as important values to them. 26% for Democrats. Independents actually care about having children less than Democrats at 20%. That's a number I didn't expect. Community involvement. Finally, Democrats were taking a W on this. Still not a big W, tiny W, because the number is still piss poor in comparison to 2019. 32% of Democrats value community involvement compared to 23% from independents and 25% from Republicans. As for money, big surprise, Democrats and Republicans are in a deadlock. They are tied 45 to 45 with independents at 36%. These are pretty interesting numbers, man. Oh my gosh, we got more here? Oh my goodness. For each of the following, has our society gone too far, not gone far enough, or is it about right? Shown by percentage who says too far. So accepting people who are transgender, 15% of Democrats think we've gone too far. That's pretty good numbers for the Democratic Party. It's pretty low. Okay, that's not too bad. 47% of independents, that's not good. That's not good. We see trans bans across the state happening. That's not good across the country. 75% of Republicans believes it's gone too far. Not that surprising, but still very disappointing, and shows that now transgender rights has become a hotly partisan issue. It is 100% a partisan issue, straight down the middle. 47% of independents thinks it's gone too far. I guess we can assume that it's probably similar number thinks it hasn't. Democrats, the majority of Democrats thinks it hasn't gone too far. Majority of Republicans have. The numbers even almost line up perfect. So this has become a very partisan issue. Schools and universities taking steps to promote racial and ethnic diversity. Has it gone too far? Only 6% of Democrats thinks it's gone too far. 36% of independents and 55% of Republicans. Accepting people who are gay, lesbian, or bisexual. 7% of Democrats thinks it's gone too far. 31% of independents and over 52% of Republicans. 52% of Republicans thinks we are too accepting of gays, lesbians, and bisexuals. While if you were to compare this to 2015 numbers, this is a good improvement, but it still shows that a slight majority of Republicans still not that cool with the queers. Business taking steps to promote racial and ethnic diversity. 7% think it's gone too far with Democrats, 29% independents, 52% Republicans. And lastly, promoting equality between men and women have gone too far. Only 2% of Democrats, very happy, non-sexist gang. That 2% is solely made up of Joe Manchin and a few of his colleagues. 15% of independents thinks it's gone too far, and 21% of Republicans. Wow. Some pretty interesting polling data, man. Some pretty interesting polling data. But man, the thing that scares me the most is that community involvement thing, man. I am terrified about the effect COVID, January 6th, and partisanship has had on community involvement and on patriotism. So, yeah, man, pretty concerned. Thankfully, the young people still somewhat care about hard work. Hopefully, we can inspire them to work even harder in the mines in the near future.